The movie begins with a scene showing that John Leshitsky has just been released from prison after his third sentence and is already at a store picking out a new weapon. He had been drawn to the dark side since childhood. At just 8 years old, John stole a van, thinking there was $1 million inside, but instead, it contained a massive lottery check. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to cash it. Guilty, the judge declared. Society must be protected from worthless scum like you. The verdict, 7 years in juvenile detention. That's how the system turned John into a hardened criminal. At 18, he tried to rob some mail carriers, but ended up unloading his gun into a mailbox when he tried to scare them. The sentence, 4 years. If stupidity were a crime, you'd be doing life, the judge said. 6 months after being released, the same judge sent John back behind bars for stealing a car. Once free again, the guy decided that he needed to take revenge on the judge. But there was a problem. The old man had passed away 3 days earlier. In a fit of rage, the repeat offender shot up a phone booth. Right after that, he went to a bar to drink and figure out what to do next. He had spent his whole life dreaming of getting revenge on the judge. But then, by chance, he came across an article saying that the judge's son, Biederman, was opening a memorial. It seemed John had found someone to take his anger out on. While Nelson Biederman was giving his speech, the criminal snuck into his car. There, he stole some change, emptied his inhaler, and even spat in his coffee, twice. Nelson turned out to be a real piece of work. He squandered money and yelled at the chairman of his father's foundation. Already in the car, he takes a sip of that very coffee. John is driving nearby, watching his target. The asthmatic desperately tries to use the empty inhaler, then panics and rushes into a pharmacy to find a new one, knocking over shelves. "Robber!" the store owner shouts. "Another junkie!" his pharmacist wife complains. Finally, the inhaler is found, but the family thinks the lunatic is now threatening them with a gun.
No! Tiny gun!
John added some spice by firing his gun. The lady responded by shooting Nelson with a shotgun. The whole chaotic scene was caught on surveillance cameras, and the rich boy was soon arrested. The board of directors, upset with their boss, had no intention of helping Nelson get out of jail. Their legal department supposedly advised him to take the fall. The time has come for Nelson Biederman's trial. John is also present in the courtroom. Relying on his father's good name, the spoiled brat tries to settle things personally with the judge. But the judge, a woman, hates guys like him, and everything is going strictly by the book. His fate will be decided by a jury full of idiots, according to Nelson. And he may not be wrong. Fingers get ripped off and reattached. Biederman's defense was taken up personally by Dwayne, his deputy, who deliberately started spouting complete nonsense, and even brought up the movie Jurassic Park. In the end, the jury found Nelson guilty of attempted robbery, and he was sentenced to between 3 and 5 years to be served in Rosmar prison. John imagines how often Biederman will get beaten and raped in prison. He realizes that weed no longer brings him any pleasure, and he feels no joy. What he really wants now is to personally hurt the rich boy. So, when 2 undercover cops showed up pretending to buy weed, he acted like he hadn't figured them out, and willingly let himself get arrested again. That way, he could make sure he ends up in the same prison as Biederman. That's now his life's goal. He bargained with the judge over the length of the sentence. They agreed on 3 to 5 years, but John specifically requested to serve his time in Rosmar. He even managed to get on the same bus as Nelson and quickly struck up a friendship with him. John suggests that the spoiled brat should ask to be placed in the same cell. Nelson is grateful for the kindness, since the other inmates treated him, to put it mildly, coldly. The prison warden, comes out to welcome the new batch of inmates. He asks, "Raise your hand if you're innocent. We'll let you go right now." One guy raises his hand and immediately gets hit in the gut with a rifle butt. That's one of my jokes. Now, if you have complaints, write them down on paper, roll it into a tube, and shove it up your ass, Warden tells the newbies. John already knows some of the guards and bribes one of them to get placed in the same cell as Biederman. Nelson walks down the corridor, terrified by all the murderers and thieves yelling at him. Finally, he reaches his cell, a 2-square-meter concrete box. John is already lying on the bunk, smoking a cigarette. Nelson can't handle the stress and immediately sits on the floor and starts crying. Johnny advises him to stop before the others see it. Otherwise, he won't last until next week. John demands that his cellmate show him a ferocious snarl, but Nelson makes a face like he's constipated. John gets some delayed mail. Apparently, the U.S. spends $54 a day to house one inmate. Nationwide, that's $75 million per day, or $28 billion a year. Maybe it would have been easier to just let them steal car stereos. In the cafeteria, John points out the White Brotherhood. Their leader is Linhart. He also warns his cellmate that at exactly 12:15, he needs to stand up from the table. But Nelson gets carried away, reminiscing about his college days. And right then, Linhart stabs another inmate right in front of him. Guard Shanahan punches Nelson and asks, "Who did it?" Following John's whispered advice, Nelson points to Linhart. But back in the cell, Linhart confronts him. Snitches don't last long in prison. Another interesting place in prison is the shower. A big guy named Barry takes a liking to the fresh-faced newbie and starts hitting on him. But John tells everyone that Nelson is his bitch and threatens another inmate with a shiv.
"Hey, he's my property, dick monster. You guys got that? This little filly's all mine. You can look, but don't touch."
Entry into this white ass is closed to others, John declares. "I mean, I appreciate you, John," Nelson says nervously. "But is the finger really necessary?" "No," John replies. But it happened. Nelson begs Dwayne to get him out, no matter the cost. But Dwayne tells him it's impossible. Personally, Biederman has no money. All the funds are locked in a foundation that he no longer has access to. Because he's no longer the chairman. He was fired while serving time. John pays off an inmate to regularly beat the crap out of Nelson, and he bribes the guy on kitchen duty to slip nasty stuff into his food.
Like the sailor said, quote, "Ain't that a hole in the boat?"
In the shower, Barry continues to terrorize him. The big guy is obsessed, ready to buy Nelson's ass for any price. And the deal is made. Guard Shanahan sends John out to clean the yard and leaves the cell door open. Immediately, someone bags Nelson's head and drags him off. He's thrown into a cell lit by candles and Christmas lights. Barry walks in, offers him a drink of toilet wine, and starts talking in rhymes. But then he pulls a knife to Nelson's throat. When Nelson lies and says Barry doesn't have a fat ass, Barry hates lies. He tells Nelson to sit next to him on the bed and explains, from now on, Nelson is his property and has to please him, but they won't rush things. First, Nelson has to give him an Eskimo kiss, rubbing noses. Big old Barry is a romantic after all. He's not going to just jump him. He wants to woo him. Later, while Nelson is writing a letter to his pen pal, a young boy, one of the white supremacists pees on him. It's a message from Linhart. He's getting out of solitary today. Johnny tells Nelson that the other inmates are already taking bets on where Linhart will kill him. Naive Nelson approaches Linhart to apologize, and immediately gets stabbed in the leg with a fork, then stabbed again. Linhart tells him that the only other person who ever pissed him off this badly was his father, and he killed his father, just like he'll kill Nelson. Meanwhile, Barry continues his awkward courtship. John suggests Nelson hide in solitary for a while, so, standing behind him, he punches a guard in the face. The plan works. But in solitary, Biederman starts to lose his mind. He has no idea how much time has passed. He starts hallucinating. "How long have I been here?" 2 days. Nelson decides he's had enough. He goes to the prison's chemist and asks for something to end it all. The guy offers him some boat cleaner and a syringe. Nelson writes to his pen pal, confessing his plan. "I dream of lining those bastards up and cutting off their dicks," he writes. The kid reads it out loud in class. Suddenly, Linhart shows up in Nelson's cell and pours gasoline all over him. He complains that Nelson isn't Jewish. It would have made it more satisfying. Surprisingly, Nelson fights back and smashes Linhart's face. Then he drops the syringe filled with cleaner. Linhart, thinking it's heroin, shoots up and immediately drops dead. To everyone's shock, the wimpy guy drags the Nazi leader's body out into the hallway. No one is more surprised than Johnny. That definitely wasn't part of his plan. From that day forward, everything changes for Nelson in prison. Now, the White Brotherhood backs him. Biederman becomes a shot caller, able to press anyone he wants. When he wants a black inmate's seat, they apply a little pressure to make it happen. But there's still unfinished business in the love department. Barry has fallen in love with Nelson over the past few months. And it hurts that the feelings aren't mutual. Nelson punches him in the face, but it doesn't help. Heartbroken, Barry nearly strangles Nelson in the bathroom. Nelson feels ashamed for breaking Barry's heart. He wants to make amends. But just then, the Nazis storm into the bathroom to protect their new leader, only to be told not to touch the lovesick giant.
Did he touch you, boss? We'll gut him right here.
Yes, he touched me.
Oh, sorry, that was me.
John accidentally ends up in solitary, and when he gets out, he sees that Biederman is now running the entire prison. He even put on a full musical with the inmates. John is furious at how everything turned out. And yet, Nelson thanks him for preparing him for prison life. John's revenge plan has completely fallen apart, and tomorrow is Biederman's parole hearing. To prepare for the big day, Nelson gets help from his big black friend. John walks into the cell and gives Nelson a parting gift, a can of soda, wishing him luck at the hearing. Nelson gets suspicious. The can is already opened, but his cellmate acts hurt by the mistrust. They've been through so much together. To prove everything's fine, John dramatically takes a sip himself. Nelson apologizes and chugs the entire can. A second later, he collapses. John immediately pukes into the toilet to get the poison out of his system. Then, with the help of an accomplice, he drags Nelson's unconscious body away. The next day, the parole board asks Biederman if he's ready to rejoin society. Absolutely, he replies, not knowing that someone has written "White Power" across his forehead. Naturally, his parole is denied. Nelson instantly lunges at his bastard of a cellmate. Biederman becomes a shot caller. John finally confesses the truth. It was all because of his father, the judge. Guard Shanahan is upset that the inmate started a fight without him. He usually organizes the fights. He schedules the grudge match for Friday, in the yard. It will be a fight to the death. The loser dies, and the winner will be killed by Shanahan himself. To make sure the gladiators don't chicken out, a guard is assigned to watch over them. All the inmates are placing bets on things like whether someone's skull will get cracked or an ear bitten off. Nelson gets a visitor. It's Barry. The parole board decided he's reformed, all thanks to Nelson. But Barry says he can't be happy without his little fish. He wants to break Nelson out. "I'm only leaving this place in a body bag," Nelson says. "Then they'll have to sew a bag big enough for two," Barry replies. "You replaced my family, Barry," Nelson says. Suddenly, an idea forms in Nelson's head. He calls Dwayne and informs him that if he stays in prison, he will transfer full control of the foundation to his son, and according to the bylaws, the boy will have power over everything until Nelson is released. Nelson has just adopted someone from inside the prison. Final scene. "What the hell are you doing in my office, you little shit?" Dwayne screams.
What the hell you doing in my office, bitch?
The warden also knows about the upcoming fight to the death and bets $50 on the newbie. So, Friday arrives. The fighters step into the arena amid the shouts of the inmates. The rules are simple. Whoever dies first loses. Nelson pulls out a screwdriver, but his opponent is even better prepared. One shank flies into a bystander, the other breaks against Nelson's homemade body armor. But their main weapons were saved for last, syringes filled with colorful chemicals. Nelson lands a fatal blow, but is also stabbed in the back. A draw, Shanahan concludes, and disperses the crowd. "Dead? Great. Get them out of here before they start to stink." Biederman was buried. His only heir turned out to be his adopted son, who inherited $8 million. Barry didn't leave the cemetery. He grabbed a shovel, and by evening had dug up his adoptive dad. Earlier, Nelson had ordered a special compound from the chemist that would put him in a coma, and Barry bribed the coroner. Nelson was about to leave, but Barry reminded him of their deal, to save John. If it wasn't for that idiot, we never would have met. The former enemies are still even. A year passes. Barry and Nelson opened a winery called Duckling. One critic hated their wine, but John and a couple of other former convicts who work there pressured him. The man promised to give a rating of 100 out of 100, though no one really likes that nasty ammonia-flavored swill, not even the winemakers themselves. The three of them started working together smoothly and effectively.
Oh, God damn, is that sweet.